Good afternoon, Teresa. How are you today?
I am doing well. It's a bright sunny day in Pennsylvania. Yay! Spring is here.
Spring is definitely here. I'm jealous. I'm under a tornado watch with gloomy skies and thunderstorms rolling in, so
We had thunderstorms yesterday, so I feel yeah.
got them for the next couple of days. But really excited. We're here to do a part two on Lyme interventions and just some strategies that you, the viewer, can take home with you and really just help mitigate inflammation in your body to overcome, acute Lyme, chronic Lyme, and we'll talk about some terminology here and just at-home things that you can do and some good, key takeaways that can support you on your journey if you're struggling with a condition like Lyme disease or, any autoimmune condition. Or even if you don't even know the name of your condition, but you have like fatigue and brain fog. These are some great tips. So get your pen and paper ready and you want to write this down. And Teresa, if there's anything that people, want to come to our website or go to your website and figure out, hey, you've mentioned certain products, where can they go get those?
Yeah, so we are in the process of setting up an official store where you click the button and buy the product right from us. In the meantime, there's a really good workaround. Go to my website. Up in the top right-hand corner, there's a button that says shop. And the reason it used to say shop supplements, but I'm also going to have other products. So we often talk about and recommend. But for now, click the button that says shop. You'll have the different supplement stores that I engage with. So the different places where I personally go and make recommendations. Click on there, go to that store. You can find the thing I'm looking for. You won't be able to purchase it without my code, but you could reach out to the office. There's a couple ways to do that. You can call the office. The contact information is on the website, 717-846-6890. You can fill out the contact form. Absolutely do that. That'll go directly to us. It comes to our email, which is info at foundationsandwellness.com. And the website is www.foundationsandwellness.com. So everything that we're going to be talking about are products that I have either personally used. Actually, everything that I recommend, I vet out first and I use myself and first, and then also I use these same products over and over and over and over and over for patients for the last several years.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And again, just a lot of tips and takeaways for people. I want to talk about symptoms first. I know our last discussion on Lyme was more about a kind of just a general primer, general discussion of Lyme disease, and we were all over the place on that one. But I want to give people more of just a targeted approach here for both chronic and acute. But first, can you explain the difference between acute and chronic when it relates to Lyme disease?
Yeah, acute means you feel miserable. It's happening right then. It just happened. Acute means I went out for a walk in the woods. I came home. I found a tick on my leg. It had crawled up underneath my shorts and I had to pull it out. And the next day I wake up and I may or may not see, that erythema migrans, which is that bullseye rash. It's a red in the middle, then a blanchable skin, and then red around the outside. It looks like a bullseye. That's why they call it. Um,
The
so
target score.
the target, yeah. So you don't have to have that actually to have Lyme. Sometimes people don't ever see that. Sometimes they don't ever notice that, but they still have Lyme. So acute means typically it's within a few hours or a few days of when you have that exposure to the original bite when they
Mhm.
got bitten the first time. And then chronic means that it's something that happened a long time ago and they either weren't aware that they had the infection, oftentimes that happens, or they knew they had it, they received treatment years ago, maybe they just went to a regular doctor, they got after they did find the tick and had the bullseye, they maybe got doxycycline or amoxicillin, something like that. And then, they felt better then, or maybe mostly better. But this is years later, and they still have some of the same symptoms. And the symptoms maybe will ebb and flow depending on what's going on in their life. They could, they call it, when we call chronic symptoms that show up again, is called a flare of symptoms. And think about the flare of the, breaking that stick and you put it out in the traffic and you can see it from a distance. It's a flare. Um, so and how we know that testing wise, when you have exposure to anything right away, that acute exposure, your body sees whatever that thing is. In this case, we're talking Lyme. So we're talking about the bacteria, Borrelia burgdorferi, or some other kind of Borrelia, that the body, that's the antigen. And the immune system sees that and it launches an attack and it makes antibodies. The kind of antibodies that come out in the beginning are IgM. Think M, I feel miserable. It's happening right now. Those antibodies come out within 72 hours. They can last, they peak and then they start to go away, and they can last a couple weeks to a couple months. Usually by 5 or 6 months, they're gone. In the meantime, after about a week, IgG antibodies come out. They also peak and then they kind of taper off, and they may or may not go away. And we also talked about, with Lyme, it's a little different. We look at antibodies a little bit differently. We look at different bands. There are certain bands that are more prevalent with Lyme, especially chronic Lyme. But that's our body's memory. It's how we know that we've been exposed to something. If it's something like the flu, where it comes and goes, the IgG antibodies are the ones that if we get exposed to the very same flu again, maybe we have a less severity, this case that's less severe this time, or maybe we don't get it all because our body knows what to do. It remembers. So, according to the CDC, according to their criteria, it's 2 or more of the IgM antibodies are present, and then 5 or more of the IgGs. Now, there's a little bit of a controversy on that, but that's what they say. So that's how you know acute versus chronic. And symptom-wise, sometimes the symptoms are exactly the same, and sometimes they're different. Lyme is the great masquerader. It just loves to be different things to different people at different times. So whereas they may have had maybe just joint pain and, general body aches and kind of thing the first time, some people even got a fever in the beginning. Chronic, it could be chronic fatigue, chronic muscle pain, stiffness, headaches, migraines, jaw pain, pain that kind of moves from one area of the body to the other. Some people, for kids especially, it can result in like mood changes, tics, OCD, things like that. So everybody's different, and mood swings, chronic, like real bad mood swings, ups and downs. So the presentation is a little bit different for the person and for the age, and also for the amount of time between the exposure and actually being treated. And also genetics and environment plays a role too.
Agree 100% with the environmental factor and different genetics playing a role there when we going back to acute. So it's like when Lyme disease is not diagnosed and properly addressed during that acute phase or during those first few days or weeks, it can turn chronic, like you were saying, and then lead to countless symptoms. So I want to talk about some of these symptoms before we get into like health complications that can kind of spiral down this seemingly never-ending cycle of chasing what happened to
Yeah.
occur to the point, because it does get very convoluted because of the fact you mentioned it being a great masquerader and mimicking so many
Yeah.
things. A doctor I had mentioned in our prior video is Dr. Horowitz, who's a medical doctor and he's Lyme
Yeah.
literate, upstate New York, I believe. He has a questionnaire that I love, and it has a number of symptom frequency score, overall health score stuff on here. It's a really good thing that people can probably go out and Google. And I want to say that we even have one coming up that'll be uploaded on our website soon. But some of these symptoms here that he has for people to check off to assess whether or not they possibly have a chronic Lyme, or to help facilitate the assessment of Lyme disease: unexplained fevers,
Mhm.
sweats, chills, or flushing,
Yep.
unexplained weight change, loss or gain, fatigue, tiredness, unexplained hair loss, swollen lymph glands in the throat here or down in the pelvic region, or even under the armpits, sore throat, testicular or pelvic pain, unexplained menstrual irregularity, unexplained breast milk production or breast pain, irritable bladder or bladder dysfunction. Think of interstitial cystitis, sexual dysfunction or loss of libido, upset stomach. Not there's That was 12 I named off, and he's got 38 on there total.
So think of it. I mean, let me interrupt real quick.
Go ahead.
All those symptoms, thyroid
Right.
comes to mind, sometimes diabetic symptoms can look like that, adrenal symptoms can look like that. I mean, arthritis could look like that in
Yeah.
some ways. Can you imagine? And I can't tell you how many people come to me for the first time. They feel terrible. I do this big, long, takes 14 vials of blood. It's a huge LabCorp panel that I do. Sorry, I dropped a name there. I do a blood panel. Um, and they come back and they have those IgG bands, and they're like, I never had Lyme. And I'm like, well, you wouldn't have made the antibodies unless you had exposure to that bacteria. Now, also controversial, we now, a lot of people who are Lyme literate believe that you can pass this from mom through to the child.
Mhm.
Some people don't feel that way. They believe that it's only through exposure. Either way, you either got it from your mom or you got it because you were exposed, but you have it because you wouldn't make antibodies if you didn't get
Right.
exposed. So, how many people walk around, they just have no awareness that they had this going on, and they think it's something else, or they go thinking, chasing, they go in with, say, inability to lose weight and like coldness, whatever, cold intolerance. That's like dry hair falling out. That's, and the doctor goes, oh, it's your thyroid. They don't even think to check for the, any Lyme.
And most won't, just because of the fact that you were saying the criteria for CDC is A, you have to have the acute phase kind of clinical approach that, hey, I was just bitten by a tick. I experienced the flu-like symptoms from it, and I actually went to my doctor to tell them, and they're going to want to see that EM bullseye rash, or they're going to see
Does
those
not happen half the time.
half the time it doesn't happen, or at least 40% of the time it doesn't even happen. So less of a chance of a coin flip there. Um, but your Lyme incidence score also, and well, let me preface this too, because it doesn't mean just because you have these symptoms that we named off, you have Lyme.
Right, for
And
sure.
there could be other
And the
incidences.
LabCorp test that I dropped the name. It's a really bad test. Like I tell people it's my screen.
Right.
Like there's rarely a false positive. There's all the time false negatives. It's just not a very virulent test. It just doesn't do a very good job at picking up Lyme. There's two other companies that I really, 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 really like. They are like the gold standard. And most of the Lyme literate doctors don't even recognize the second one because the other one has just been around for such a long time. This second company has done a really good job of like upping their game. They've really gone through like a lot of certification recently to say we are just as good as this guy. So
And I believe so. Those two tests that you're mentioning, IGeneX
hygienics,
is the number
vibrant,
one,
and
and
vibrant.
Vibrant Wellness is number two. And I use the
Yeah.
Vibrant for cost reasons. And even though it's still expensive, it provided me a lot of data for my wife to help her in underscoring, hey, maybe this is why we're plateauing so much.
Yeah. I
Going
tell
back,
people, even though Vibrant maybe not be as good as Hygienics, now they are as good. They literally just came, I was just saw them at a conference 2 weeks ago, and they were just like so celebrating that had just gotten to be, like every bit as good.
I love
I
them.
tell people, even though Vibrant you may not think it's as accurate as Hygienics, it's way more accurate than LabCorp.
Absolutely.
So, and it's not as expensive for some
And
people.
you can
It's
get it
definitely,
to pull in those co-infections too,
yeah.
because you can see if a person's also dealing with some other
Bartonella, Babesia,
bacteria,
Ehrlichia, Rickettsia, Rocky Mountain
mycoplasma.
spider feet, anaplasma. And we now know, like, here's the other thing, the swollen glands and the malaise and stuff. Like, we know now that there's a correlation between tick-borne illness or vector-borne illness, because we also talked about how it's not just ticks.
Mhm.
Vector-borne, meaning something that carried the blood and sucked your blood and gave you something that was in them.
Flies, mosquitoes,
Flies,
ants.
mosquitoes, ants, and there's a correlation between those people and like Epstein-Barr or chronic Epstein-Barr. A lot of times there's an overlap there. We're not even sure. It's just kind of like coming out recently where we're not even sure why there's that, and why some people just respond one way to EBV than others.
Mhm.
But there's definitely that. But think about it. I mean, the swollen glands and the malaise and the fatigue, you just like, oh, can't my get up and go, got up and went. It just they kind of go together. So I often I test for that in my initial panel and every year too, because that I often have people that didn't have an awareness that they had that either. So
100%. And Epstein-Barr, almost everybody that's like over the age of 40 or in their 50s, they're like, oh, I had mono in high school. I had Epstein-Barr. I had this.
yep.
And, and it stays dormant.
Coxsackie, Coxsackie's hand, foot, and mouth.
Mhm.
98% of the population worldwide has had Coxsackie. It can also present with symptoms. Roseola is caused by human herpes virus 6. That is implicated in chronic fatigue. So a lot of these things kind of like, they're like kissing cousins. They just kind of hang around together.
Right. So I want to talk about this questionnaire again because I want to now focus on his section 3 as it pertains to these symptoms, and it's his Lyme incident score. Because after we just named off a lot of those symptoms that could be an umbrella for anything, right? Here's some other key points to take away here. You've had a tick bite with no rash or flu-like symptoms. You've had a tick bite, a bullseye rash, or an undefined rash, followed by flu-like symptoms. And you score these as you're going down this little questionnaire. You live in what is considered a Lyme endemic area. So, Northeast, up by
Northeast.
Connecticut, all that kind of area, New Jersey, Massachusetts, which I don't believe you have to. You have a
No, if you look at the map now, I actually just looked at the map this week, and it's a lot bigger than it used to be.
well, it
Even
is.
in the North Pole, oh my gosh, there's this huge band across Alaska because I have friends who live there. Like
I just
across,
think
like
anywhere with
wow.
woods, anywhere with the density populated forest or woods, you
I didn't
have a
think anything
potential
was
to
could
get bite
live
tick.
that cold up there.
No, it's true. And you talked about too about being able to pass down from mother to child, and I agree with that because my wife, her mom is from California. Now, on the Vibrant, it'll show there's over 300 different strains of the Borrelia species, which is the bacterial um, pathogen that's transmitted from a vector or from a tick or what have you. And she had a Californiasis.
Mhm.
And so when I was talking to Vibrant about this, they're like, well, has she traveled to California recently? Is she from California? I said, well, her mom is from, and that whole side of the family's from California. Is there any connection there? And they're like, well, he goes, off the record, I will say that there are some thoughts that it can be passed from mother to child. So if she had perhaps been bitten by a tick and doesn't recall it, it could have been in her. And then if she breastfed or even being in utero in the womb, it could have went through the placental barrier to the developing fetus. And I'm just like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, yeah, it's a real thing.
And then I've had friends who've struggled with chronic Lyme who are in the health industry who have told me that they and their spouse, when intimate, can pass it back and forth to one another. So if you are,
That's a new thing too, but yeah, that's definitely what we're coming to realize.
and I was like, what? And they're like, yeah. So imagine this: you're sexually intimate with your spouse, your wife, your husband, and you're swapping fluids, right? And then if you notice that you have symptoms that come about for any reason, start to connect those dots because maybe there is something to that, that somehow the bacteria is being transferred to the fluid from just sexual contact. And that's just like, wow,
Yeah.
you could be
Yeah.
passing line back and forth to your loved one. And just like, oh my,
A lot of times if you can't get resolution in one and the other has it, but like doesn't have symptoms, it's a really good idea to treat both at the same time.
true. And
Yeah.
so this goes back to you have a family member who has been diagnosed with Lyme and or other tick-borne infections. Another one is you experience what you referred to earlier, the migratory muscle or joint pain. But then here's where it gets interesting in that um, you have received a prior diagnosis of chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, a specific autoimmune disorder like lupus or multiple sclerosis or rheumatoid arthritis, or even a non-specific autoimmune condition, Hashimoto's or what have you. Um, those are some kind of more key indicators of, hey, we might want to start to explore and investigate a pathogen behind your condition. And then in
Yeah.
this case, we're talking of Lyme disease or a co-infection.
All the time. I mean, a lot of, one of the things that besides focusing on healing the cell is, one of the things that I do is look for hidden infections, things that are there that are kind of just been there. And so with autoimmune, what happens, by nature of the process is when the body through, mimicry, the body says, now I'm a foreign invader. Now I'm the enemy. Something in my body looks like something that I should be um, concerned about and launch an attack. And so when you have these chronic these hidden infections that have been there lying, kind of like low hum, low hum, low hum, the immune system is constantly having to do something. So when you end up, and then then you get into the whole leaky gut, intestinal permeability. Then when you end up with even food sensitivities, things like that, now the body, like the immune system has so much to do
Mhm.
that at a certain point it'll reach a threshold and it's like, dang, okay, now I'm struggling. And that's when we start to see, an increase in symptoms, or where um, we start to, notice a development in things like Hashimoto's and, some of the other lupus, Sjogren, some of the other things that come along down the pike that are, more prevalent.
Absolutely. And this is where something as simple as just an acute infection of Lyme disease can turn chronic and then become very complex in nature of everything that you just mentioned. Now, think of biotoxins, hazardous substances that are organic in nature that come from a living organism. And we start thinking about our environment, mold and yeast, Lyme disease, viral infections, as you mentioned with Epstein-Barr, and then bacterial toxins that are secreted by our own bacteria in our gut. So we have our gut garden that's home to a plethora of organisms, both good and bad, and
Mhm.
they're there to have a symbiotic relationship with one another. But when we start teetering on the edge of, I have a more unhealthier population of bacteria, they can release toxins that's adding more fuel to the fire to the inflammation component in our body. And so you have this web of complexity. And, that's why we don't want to really look and focus so much on the label, so to speak, of Lyme, lupus, because it's an immune attack.
Right.
How can
100%.
we balance the immune and how can we strategically calm down that
Yeah.
immune flare? Because that's when we're going to be able to help rid or at least remediate the body of these toxins, this influx of toxins, if you will.
And immune, like the what you're talking about, the immune response, that like this raging immune thing, all that like leads to this raging inflammation. Like they just kind of like, like they're feeding back and forth all the time. So, and when there's like chronic inflammation is like implicated in, I don't know, 90% of all the chronic diseases out there, probably 100% of the chronic diseases. So, yeah, it's just a vicious cycle that we have to figure out, at the entry point of how to break that cycle. And actually, like for me, one of the things that I do, and I'd like to talk, get into talking about what we do for treatment to support. Um,
Yeah.
there's like, when I start somebody out, like I just kind of like get their body ready to start to do something, because I'm going to start to ask it to do a whole lot. And so I just always just assume that they don't have a pristine diet and they don't get a lot of variety. So I always recommend a good whole food, organic, multi-food vitamin.
Mhm.
I always recommend something to support the cell membrane. We've talked about that so many times. It's made up of a phospholipid layer, bilayer. So phosphatidylcholine, omega 6s and 3s at the right ratio, 4:1. I always recommend something to upregulate mitochondrial function. So, we need B vitamins to upregulate as part of the function of methylation, and we need the right kind. And if you don't methylate well, especially if you're genetically predisposed, you can't convert folic acid into methylfolate, which is what we need for mitochondrial function. And our mitochondria produces our energy. It helps us to detox. It's one of the things that's involved in genetic expression, so turning on good or bad genes. So we need our mitochondria to work really well, especially if we have fatigue. Like we need them to work really well so they can make more energy. They're the powerhouse. They make ATP, which is our energy. So I always recommend a methylated B complex. And then we almost everybody is deplete in minerals, and trace minerals are involved in a lot of different functions and pathways. So always recommend, if the whole food vitamin doesn't have a good supply of trace minerals, or even if it does, oftentimes in the beginning we'll give extra because we just need that. And then feeding the microbiome. We get a new microbiome every 3 months, and we need a variety of good things. And there are different bacteria that do different things. So, and most people, those were my first big five. And then I also started adding vitamin D because everybody's depleted. If you don't get out in the sun in the wintertime, we just don't. With full skin exposure, like whole, like bathing suit exposure, 15 minutes, you can make 10,000 IUs of vitamin D, which is so important in our immune function, our healing, and the ability to repair and heal itself. So if we don't get full sun exposure, we don't get it in our diet. So we have to supplement it. So I don't, like I just added that as like a staple. That's my maintenance. Then we start talking about what we can do to help, treat some of the things that are going on. That's what, then we can start looking at supporting the liver to be able to detox. We can look at, herbs and things like that to help deal with the different infections. So those are my maintenance suggestions.
100%, because you don't want to always just jump right into killing things like most people do, because you don't
You'll
want to,
feel worse.
you'll have what we call a Herx reaction.
And your body is not going
Or
to like you at all. You're not going to like the way you feel.
And then
So,
a person's more apt to give up because they didn't like the way it made them feel. But yet, if we can guide them and let them know that herxing is a possibility, but it's a gauge to let us know how full their bucket is. I know we talk about this a lot,
yeah,
and how much more support we need to give to those drainage pathways, the
yeah,
liver, the colon, and just different areas,
yeah,
making sure they're pooping and things aren't stagnant and clogged. So supporting detoxification and reducing inflammation,
yeah,
supporting the immune system reserve. So, I mean, there's a lot of different things that we can go into detail about here, but talking about some of the herbs specifically when we're looking at Lyme disease, it's good to find, you can do like single herbs, but it's great to find things that are in combination in a
mm-hmm,
bottle that
mm-hmm,
you can get. So like sweet wormwood, cat's claw or artemisian, Japanese knotweed, milk thistle is a great liver supporting herb. So when you have this like blend, if you will, of killers or immune supportive ingredients, but also organ protective ingredients. It's kind of
mm-hmm.
a 1-2 punch,
Yeah, yeah,
so that you are getting some, but still, I would want to make sure that what you mentioned, we have all these other pieces in play before just jumping right into a killer.
100%. Like you definitely have to prep everything. Like if you think of the way your body removes toxins as a funnel, like you got to
Mhm.
poop every day. Like you have to. That's the at the bottom. If that's clogged, nothing else is going to work. You got to
Right.
support your
Just backs everything
kidneys
up.
because it backs everything up. And above that is the kidneys, which is like the sieve where everything filters through like a mesh sieve. And above
Mhm.
that's the liver. The liver is like the washing machine. It takes breaks things down and uses it or it moves it over into the next phase where it breaks it down even more or and it takes it from being bound to fat to being bound to water. And this is where we make glutathione
Mhm.
and is a second part, and so that it can move out of the body through the kidneys or the colon. And then above that, we actually can excrete through our lungs and then through our skin. So we have to, start by the first question, how do you poop? How many times a day? 24 hours. Once something goes in, should come out, right? And you think you're pooping great, you probably aren't.
Right.
And so I always start there, and then the kidneys, for the most part, unless something's really going on, just half your body weight in ounces in filtered water is what I recommend. And then for the liver, I love phase one herbs. I love turmeric is great for supporting phase one, which is curcumin. Um, I like dandelion root, burdock root, silymarin, which is milk thistle. Those are all really great. And then for phase two, I often give extra glutathione, liposomal glutathione, something that gets absorbed in the mouth and not doesn't have to make it through the digestive tract
Mhm.
um, to help support, phase two. Some of my favorite products, if we're going to put it out there, I love Pure Body Clear by Energetics. That has all the things we talked about. I love Phytocore by Orthomolecular, also has all the things we talked about. Those are the two that I use a lot. Um, and then I
Byron
like,
White, great protocols for killing Lyme too. I know you've used those successfully.
who's that?
Byron White.
Yeah. So yeah, so those are my favorite livers. Oh, plus Try
Oh,
Fortified
livers,
by
I'm sorry.
by Research Nutritionals. And then herb collections of herbs. So my two favorite drop forms the way I like to deliver, let's put it this way. The way I like to deliver herbal combinations is in dropper form. So it gets absorbed mostly in the mouth, doesn't have to go through the digestion. Byron White formulas are stronger and they're alcohol based. And some people, it's just like kicks them in the butt too hard and they just can't do it. Beyond Balance, really good, great combinations. They're glycerin based. Um, and I can use those for kids. I can use those for elderly people who are more sensitive. Either one, they really work really well. And I just start slow or start low and go slow
There you
and
go.
just see how they do. And Byron White and Beyond Balance, they both have specific formulas for Borrelia, Bartonella, and Babesia. And then they have, ones for like when we're talking things like mold or viruses, they have really good ones specifically targeted for Epstein-Barr, specifically targeted for Coxsackie. Um, Beyond Balance doesn't label them quite the same way, but they also do the same thing. And those are my favorite. Systemic Formula has some really great herbs too that they come in capsule form or dropper form. Orthomolecular just came out with one, too. Phytocidal is one, and also oh geez, I'm drawing a blank. I can see it. Um, it's okay, it'll come back to me. I'll have to come to it. It starts with a C. I'm just drawing a blank. But it's really good for spirochetes. And cat's claw is amazing.
Yeah.
It's just like it like drives whatever if you take it with whatever, it drives it into the cell and just gets it deep into the tissue so that think about the way a cat's claw just kind of like digs in. So I really, really like those. But one of the things that some providers that I've known do like completely miss is that anytime you give those herbs, you have to give something to grab them and get them out of the
Binder.
body. You got to take a binder. If you don't, all you're doing is killing stuff and resorbing it. It's called auto intoxication. You kill it off and you resorb it. And that's why people end up with chronic infections and feeling worse than they did in the first place,
Mhm.
because they're not taking something um, to grab a hold of everything that's dying and getting rid of it. So you got to take a binder. So a couple of favorites, Orthomolecular has one called Z binder. I really like that. It has a combination of like charcoal and humic and fulvic acid. Um, and
Toxin pull and myco pull from
Toxin Pool is really great for like glyphosate detoxification and mycopol for detoxing from mold. Systemic has one called Bind, or now they just upgraded it. It's called Bindgenic. It has like,
they're really good. My wife loves that one.
yeah, I like it a lot too.
It's not constipating because it has a natural
It
herb in
has
it
apropectin in it, so that keeps you from going
and
get
Cascara
constipated.
sagrada in there too to help with bowel movement.
Yeah.
It's really,
Um,
and it's not non-habit forming.
yeah. So just real quick before we wrap up, one of the things I wanted to talk about was Herxine. So people are so afraid that they're gonna feel bad, and they call it Herxheimer because there was a Dr. Herxheimer that originally came up with that term. And
Mhm.
really, it's just die-off symptoms. When things start to die, they the cells burst and they burst open their contents, and then all the toxins come out.
Which is why we take a binder to help.
Right. So it could be things like you could feel worse fatigue, body aches, headaches,
Mhm.
tiredness, or the opposite, where you're like ramped up, you're agitated, you're anxious, that kind of stuff.
Irritable even. I've experienced
Irritable.
that. I
Yep.
have more of the emotional stuff, which is like maybe in Chinese medicine, we need to hit the liver more with some support there because
Right. For
emotions
sure.
are support there.
Yep. So some of the things that I recommend, the easiest thing is besides the binder is something called Alka-Seltzer Gold, or you can make your own. It's basically sodium bicarbonate and citric acid, because what's happening is your body becomes more acidic when you're releasing all those toxins. So you're just trying to alkalinize it so that and this is not the same as you can drink alkaline water. I don't propose doing that all the time. I know it's a thing out there. It's not my favorite thing. You can use it. It has a time and a place. So I don't mind that for this. Um, but yeah, Alka-Seltzer Gold works really well. It was completely hard to find during the pandemic, but I could buy baking soda and I can buy citric acid and I make my own. So that's what I did. Epsom salt baths. I love Epsom salt baths.
My
The
wife does too.
magnesium sulfate just relaxes you. It pulls all the toxins through the skin. Our skin is our largest detox organ. So that works really well. Castor oil packs. So you get some organic castor oil and some muslin. You soak the muslin in the castor oil. You put it on your across your liver, which is like underneath your right side of your rib cage.
Mhm.
Wrap it around so it stays in place and you don't get your clothes all oaky. And
Yep.
then you put a heating pad or a hot water bottle on it, and that helps to break up the congestion in the liver. It's not everybody's favorite because it is a little messy, unless you there are pre-made, so you can do that. That's easy. And then the other thing, also not everybody's favorite, is coffee enemas. Organic, toxin-free, mold-free. Get a stainless steel kit and get good coffee. And the coffee helps to, and actually, if you precede it by taking
Mind.
phosphatidylcholine,
Oh,
you push the toxins out.
dump.
Yep, you dump it out. You do the coffee enema. It grabs it, and then you take it out, and then you take some binder after that too to grab anything that's still circulating. But and I always recommend if you're going to do the PC push, then you want to do some ox bile to help
Mhm.
support, because it's a lot of fat, and some
Yeah.
people don't digest fats very well, or if you don't have a gallbladder, you need the
Right.
extra support. Or
That's
if you're vegetarian and you don't want to do the ox bile, you can use bitter herbs. Ginseng herbs will help to break that down too.
phenomenal advice there. And I know my wife has done those many things, and coffee enemas and castor oil packs are just incredible extra support on top of that. I mean, the
Yeah,
coffee enemas, especially anybody going through a detox or any type of thing like this, if they want to, really support themselves and lessen symptoms, a coffee enema can do wonders
yeah.
because
Some
also
people
that,
have to get over the idea. Like it's not, honestly, I suggested this to my dad when he was, had cancer, and he wouldn't do it. Um, he wouldn't do it. And he was just totally Western minded, and he wouldn't do anything that I said. And he died when I was 28. So not, for some people that you just have to get over the mindset shift that this is different. It is acceptable. People all around the world do this. In other countries, they do this still. They've been doing this for thousands of years. We're just, and kind of in this since World War II. It's our we've been directed to think a certain way.
Mhm.
And so it's hard to overcome, but these things are tried and true, ancient ways. Ayurvedic, Chinese medicine, First Nations, Native Americans, this is all stuff that they used to do for thousands of years, and they still do today.
there's even coffee enemas that go back to the Egyptians. My mindset on the coffee enemas wasn't from just a Western conventional perspective. It was, hey, I ain't sticking nothing up my butt. That was my thought process. And
Yeah,
then finally I had to overcome that. Like, okay, just relax. I can do it. And then I have. I've done several coffee enemas and they're great. They really are. The
yeah,
first time going around, it can be a little messy. So just
yeah,
get in the bathroom and put a towel down and you'll be okay. But other
yeah,
than that, they get better and easier the more you do them, and they really
yeah,
do help. So
yeah,
great advice. I know we're out of time. I want to say
yeah,
the last few things here that can hold people back from their recovery of Lyme disease or some type of chronic illness. And we can go into another video in the future talking about these, because this is kind of where um, things like untreated co-infections, which we really didn't get
yeah,
into today, Babesia, Bartonella, or the other bugs that we mentioned, like the Epstein-Barrs. I know we touched on them briefly, but we didn't really go in depth on them. But biofilm, heavy metals,
yeah,
methylation effects, and there's numerous other things too that can really set people back. And that's where the complexity of everybody being different and having their own journey, their own
yeah,
bio individual process. And that's
yeah,
why we're speaking in terms of generality here, but we do like to bio individualize each unique person because we're all like fingerprints. We all have
yeah,
different fingerprints and we all have different needs,
yeah,
even though we might have the same label.
yeah,
Lyme disease A, Lyme disease B
yeah,
probably aren't going to have the exact same treatments.
yeah.
And so,
That's where I do. And I forgot to mention, I always give something to bust up a biofilm, which we can talk about later. But I have a test that I run that kind of looks at all the detox pathways and the biofilm and all these different infections that will, excuse me, give me guidance. It's called the bioscan, and it gives me guidance on how to do, because everybody is different. Everybody's needs are different. And so, it isn't a one size all fits approach. It's very customized, very individualized. So, yeah, I highly recommend. The first time I saw that test, somebody used that, was years and years ago, and it was very eye opening, and it was very telling of the things that were there that I was, had no awareness of. And so yeah, I would highly recommend. So, absolutely contact us if you're interested. And there's more information about it on the website too.
Foundationsandwellness.com. Teresa, this has been a phenomenal video interview once again, and I hope people find a lot of information and value in this because there's a lot of takeaways and tips that they can run away with at this moment and go attempt, supporting their organ systems in their body and hopefully mitigating some symptoms if they're struggling or not able to find anyone. Again, you can go to the website, foundationsandwellness.com. But yeah, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. It helps us out. When you give a thumbs up and like this video, it pushes it out there on the algorithms through YouTube to get this information out there in front of more people. So it really does help us spread the awareness.
Yeah.
I think it's over 400,000 cases each year, according to the CDC, of Lyme disease. And so and we're in springtime, so people are outdoor more and going hiking more, and you might not even really think about ticks. And we haven't even really talked about natural repellents with essential oils that you can throw on yourself to help, lessen,
Lemongrass,
right? Lemongrass.
my
I
favorite.
just have to take, peppermint, eucalyptus, and rosemary, and just rub it all over my pants and socks, and
Yeah.
hope that that strong scent will keep them away. But yeah,
Yeah.
there's Texas cedar wood's a really good one too to help repel bugs. But yeah, there's a lot of uh, DIY, do it yourself
Yeah.
essential kits that you can help
Yeah.
protect yourself when out there hiking. But really great time. I really appreciate this. And thank you again for coming on. And we'll see you again next week. And any other final words you want to say?
No, just, the very last thing I will say is just, if you do struggle with chronic Lyme, it is hard to not wear that as an identity. Lyme is not who you are. It's something that you struggle with. It's not who you are. It's not your identity. And, that's a whole other topic. We'll talk, we're definitely going to do a mindset talk sometime soon. So just, take courage, have hope, and don't give up. There is hope.
Absolutely. There is often a link between emotional trauma and stressors and chronic illness. And is it cause or effect? We'll talk about that soon in an upcoming video. So stay tuned when we put that out because chronic illness can be contributed by emotional stressors or traumas. And chronic illness can also cause emotional stress and trauma. And
Yeah.
I can't wait to do that one. That'll be a deep dive for sure. So looking
Yeah.
forward to it. Teresa,
All
thank you
righty.
so much. You have a blessed week and a
All
blessed
right.
weekend. See you again.
You as well. Bye bye.
Bye.